Hi Alvin, how are you today?
Very well, Ralph. How are you?
I'm good too, just sweating along here. We have heat wave, as you probably heard. But
I can tell you're wearing t-shirt. Must be
oh,
very
but
hot. What's the
but you
what's the
too.
temperature?
Well, I guess it's nothing impressive for you guys. 35 degrees Celsius, but for us here, it's out of the norm, right? At least, I mean, we have it for weeks, and so it's also yeah. That makes it, but we get used to it, right? So, but you guys have also humidity, I guess, and everything, so it makes it worse, right? So,
Yeah, it's hot in Malaysia, but it was hotter in Shanghai because I was in Shanghai quite recently.
mhm.
It went to a high of about maybe 38, 39 degrees. So very, very hot also in China at this point of time.
Here we go, right? So, China,
But the
that's
only
exactly.
difference is only difference is that in China everyone has air conditioning.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We will also come up with that one more. It's a bestseller here, so many Chinese models, I guess, are being sold. So China high tech, that's the topic. You're the man to talk to because you had and are still involved with lots of Chinese high tech companies, but you're based in Kuala Lumpur, right? And now calling from there. Maybe give a brief intro before I forget something, because a very long list to tell us what's important for the folks to know about you, please.
Right. My name is Alvin Foo. You can easily search me on Google or LinkedIn. I'm pretty visible there. I'm a venture capital, and I've lived in China at least over 20 years. 20 years in China, based out of Shanghai, and now in between Shanghai and also Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, which is actually my base, my home, where I grew up. But spent great deal of time in China from 2001 up until this point. So it's been a long time. I'm mainly in leadership position. My roles are mainly in that role for at least 20 years in China. So I had the opportunity to I saw the entire phenomena that came upon us. That China went from a country that was relatively very poor and to where it is right now.
Mm.
So it's been a privilege because it's my motherland. That was where my grandparents came from. So to be able to see what it was and what it is now, truly fascinating, truly fascinating. And of course, I've also learned a lot, and I must say I'm constantly learning because China is always evolving. I don't think there's a Chinese expert. I think anyone will tell you the Chinese expert. Well, the question will always be expert to until which point.
All right.
So it's evolving, right? It's ever evolving. So there's so much to learn in China.
Yeah, but I think you also didn't you work for Google when they were in China still? Did I read this correctly? Is that right? So
Yeah,
you,
this was like, I think 15 years ago. So
right.
in its early days, that was Google in its early days. And they're still in China, very, very big in China, especially serving we call it the export market, where targeting local companies who then advertise on Google asset around the world. So
Mm.
companies like Facebook, Google, and also Amazon provide a platform for Chinese manufacturers and also partners, right, to work with them abroad outside China.
Mm. Oh, so Google is still there doing business. I thought they left it, but maybe they only left parts of the business then. So I'm not correctly.
They never left China.
No.
They had always been in China.
Mhm.
Besides just being business, right? China, it's also a very, very good spot for spotting new talents.
Mm.
Uh, China, has something like 10 million new graduates coming into the system every year, and also some of their universities are one of the top at least top 10 universities in the world. So it's also a very ripe spot for international companies, including Google, to be looking for good talent, and it has got a very, very good talent pool. If you look at a lot of AI companies in the US or even in China, a lot of these talents are coming from these top universities in China.
Right. So today we actually want to talk specifically about one topic that's, of course, related to the event goal, and that is to explore if now Chinese high tech gaining more and more leadership in the world and also in these hot topics around AI, it seems, how they can serve as a trustworthy technology partner for Switzerland, for Europe. And yeah, so that's where we actually want to tap into your expertise and hear your opinion, how this can be made to work, because there's quite some discussion around this, and no, not everyone seems willing to do this yet. So let's get started on how do leading Chinese technology companies view Europe today? So what makes a European company an attractive partner? So just from the Chinese company perspective, right? So don't forget about Switzerland or something. Just how do Chinese company approach this and think about this? So that would be interesting to understand.
I mean, there are a few points that China always look positively to Europe, right? Europe has contributed a lot to China over the last 30 years. If you track back, right, a lot of development that China has done in automotive, right,
Sure.
in aviation, in automotive, in manufacturing, and so much more, right? A lot of them are coming from Europe, including premium brands, precision, certification, and that has always been, I think, the pros, the advantage of Europe, and China has always looked at Europe being that in that leadership position where they're able to provide massive knowledge and also contribution in the especially manufacturing. If you look at a lot of these smart manufacturing, a lot of them are actually coming from Europe. That's how they see Europe. Uh, the position, I don't think the position may have changed a little, but they still look at Europe in a very different way.
Mm. All right. So ultimately, things are changing, right? China is not anymore the low-cost manufacturing hub and the engineering is mainly done in Europe, and then maybe some adaptation is done or some lower level things are done in China. China is technology power by itself, and is now, of course, also exporting into the world where they're allowed to export. Europe, they can still. The US looks a bit different in many areas. And so my question here is now, of course, China is becoming a competitor, and therefore, and at the same time, also a technology leader. More than half of the high tech feels China, and I think only a few folks know this. Whenever I mention this, they think they cannot be true. More than half of all the high tech fields, China is actually already a world technology leader, right? So if you want to have the cutting edge technology, you must look into Chinese companies, and not Europeans, not Americans, and in many other areas they're catching up and might overtake here as well. So it's a very valid question. How can then you also work together with Chinese as a technology partner, and how can this be made work? Such relationships. Let's discuss trust and long-term relationships. Now it's suddenly the other way around, and Europe needs to get used to this. And my feeling is also that Europe needs to actually now learn from China more than the other way around. And that's of course something that they're unfamiliar with and might not even accept. So, but how do you see this in particular? How can trust be built, and how can long-term relationships being started? That would be interesting to hear from your perspective. Is this actually realistic even?
I think it's a mindset. I
Mm,
think very important is a mindset. You mentioned earlier, China used to be doing mainly low-end manufacturing,
mm,
and today they are doing very advanced manufacturing. And just like any country that gone through the evolution, most country would start at low manufacturing and gradually move upstream. And
sure.
China has done that very well in the sense that they have
Very
actually
fast.
gone
So,
from very fast. And everything in China is accelerated.
mm,
Nothing is slow because the Chinese has a way of trying to get to certain scale rapidly. And
Mm,
that's applied to everything, applied to tech companies, applied to manufacturing, applied to agriculture, applied to everything. It's
mm,
always trying because of the competition within the country, right? They are so used to competing, and therefore speed becomes a, a given thing. It's not like
mm.
speed and innovation is something that they have to build. Speed and innovation is something that's ingrained in them. It's in their DNA. So
Right.
that's a reason why innovation is so rapid in China because of competition, not just external but domestically.
Mm,
The domestic competition is greater than external. If you look
mm.
at competition, let's say if you look at EV for example, EV, there's the reason why the competition is so stiff is because so competitive is because of the innovation that all these car brands, the 100 over EV brands in China, have to compete with each other in a domestic market.
Yeah.
And because of that competition, it drives innovation. But of course, it's also drive things to the bottom. It drive price to the bottom. But the crux of it is because of competition within China that
Mm.
innovation becomes it's given. Everyone expect innovation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going back to your original question was now it's really a mindset. I try not to use the term competition. I think competition happens everywhere, right? Competition within the European countries, they compete, right? And everybody compete. But why look at Europe versus China or US versus China? Why can't it be Europe and China, right? That why don't they look at each other as collaborating partners and see how to tap on each other's value proposition, right? Each other's competitive edge, and then grow the business instead of a zero sum game that it's either you or me. I see an opportunity because Europe has its advantage. Europe has that well, I'm not using the word heritage, but has its advantage. Like as I've said earlier, in the area of certification, in the area of smart manufacturing, in the area of precision, there's a lot of good quality and value of Europe that you can bring to the table. So instead of trying to let's compete with the Chinese, or the biggest topic now is being coined in German the China shock, right? The China shock
Yeah.
2.0.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean the fact is that I mean the Germans or many European companies has been in China for a long time. If you track back to Volkswagen, they
Sure.
have been in China since the 70s.
Mm.
So so if I look back at history, they know China very well. I mean, a lot of this senior leadership team that I've worked with, I don't want to name the brand, but I've worked with, these are Germans who live in China for a long time. So it's not shocking, right? There's nothing shocking. It's like they saw the progression, right? And it was written all over the wall, right? And it's just
Mm.
that they had allowed China to become. Now, again, China innovation within the domestic market is already very competitive. So so competition initially was, if you look at track back before, right? They were trying to learn how to build a car. I remember in those days when I was in China, like buying a Chinese car is like, wow, shit, that's horrible. Nobody will want to buy a Chinese car because it's really low quality, right?
Mm.
This was a combustion engine day where
Yeah, yeah.
the
Elon
BAT,
Musk made fun
BYD.
BYD, right? He took this back, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the BAT, sorry, the BBA, which is if you look at Benz, BMW, and also Audi, they've been around for a long time. In fact, when I was in China in my early days, a lot of those government official car were Audi in those days, right? So they were in China even before I went to China, right?
Yeah.
So this progress and development that's going on in China is not magically just happened last night. It took them a long time to learn, to perfect it, and now the game changed everything. So what is
Mm.
happening to the industry, the automotive industry being one example, is that is because the way that they have changed the game completely disrupted the way the the automotive industry was very used to. And suddenly now the industry that used to be ahead now has to play a huge catching game. And it applies to not just the automotive industry, but it applies to all industry,
Mm,
right? And I think that's what's lacking in terms of like now China likes to do things like this. Yeah, they like to iterate very quickly. Like how they would build a car, they will build a car and they will update accordingly when needed while building a car,
mm,
right? Well, if you compare this to the automotive industry in Europe, is they will probably try and fix all the problem and then build a car and ship it out in 8 to 10 years or 7 to 10 years. But if you look at the Chinese, they will build a car in 18 months and they will iterate from that car and they
mm.
will update over the year, right? So so that's how Chinese has always been you know in manufacturing or in any industry, right? They want to move very quickly. They want to
Yeah.
trial and error, and they want to
Because of
perfect it. They
because of
want to
the
get
local
better.
competition, they had no choice to but
They had no
accelerate. Yeah.
choice. You're absolutely right. So the innovation and also the competitiveness, right? It's not because they are being forced by foreigners. Now, in my years of running companies in China, for several years already, the Chinese company were not looking for inspiration from abroad. They were looking for they were looking at what the others are doing and at the same time trying to innovate in within China in the domestic market. This is like I could remember as far as at least 10 years. So within 10 years, they have reached a point where they have to compete with each other for the domestic market. And the international market, the overseas market wasn't even, to them, it wasn't something that they are threatened, right? And this thing about China shock too, as I've said earlier, right, should not be shocking, right?
Mm.
And I think Europe and China can. I mean, the image of Europe to Chinese people are still. I think if you compare it to US, it's a lot more positive, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
the trust level with the Europeans are a lot higher than the Americans. I think there's an opportunity, right, with the right dialogue, with the right team, with the right framework. I think it should not be China versus Europe. It should be
Yeah.
China and Europe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think what you said, of course, is well known, but it's good to hear from your experience. Let's dive in. So, how could such collaboration look like, practically speaking, right? Let's You can pick any maybe any industry, whatever. Let's pick one. It could also be hypothetically where China is now leader, right? And the gap gets bigger, and there's a clear need to collaborate for Europe if they even want to still stay in this business, right? Is it realistic to form then partnerships that are based on win-win and even be possible for Europe to learn, right? And learn, for example, to do things faster. I mean, that's that's probably
I,
one of the biggest learnings that or adaptations that they need to do, right? Or is this just not realistic? So how would could this how could this look like? And can you dive into this a bit? I mean, and what would have to happen that this can be launched and this is becomes feasible? Because right now it looks like it's working into very competitive situation, and of course you mentioned shock. Yeah, it is a shock. I don't know. I personally also don't know why, but looks like they have really ignored this for a long time, and now and now they call it a shock. But fact is, they see it as a shock, and if you're shocked about someone, it's not becoming naturally your next collaboration partner, right? It's becoming your enemy, right? And you start to do all kinds of stuff against them and not with them. So anyway, so how let's try to address this part. That's very important, I think, to talk about.
so I've said it earlier, right? One thing is that the mindset and attitude has to change. If the attitude and mindset is to look at it as a shock and to compete, then collaboration will be very difficult. I think China is very willing to explore partnership, collaboration, and to take advantage of what the European partners. It's good in that market, right? And then the
Mhm.
European companies should be looking at China what they're good at, like manufacturing at scale, and innovation. Now, let's. I think one of the best example, if it's happening right now, is actually if you look at the auto industry.
Mm.
I'm already seeing Audi. I'm already seeing BMW and Mercedes Benz working domestically in China, like working with partners, working with Huawei, working with strategic partners to build, create where they want to create and manufacture and design and manufacture the cars here. So that's one example. Now, if you look at what China is good at right now, I mean, that's why the attitude and mindset has to change. If the attitude and mindset don't change, very difficult. So if you look at your partner, oh, he's an enemy or he's my competitor, therefore I compete directly with him. But if I look at him and said, let's look at it, look at this company, look at China objectively. What are they good at? What I'm lacking? Right,
Mm.
so a self-reflection is very important. Like, I know it's not easy because they're so used of being ahead, right? And suddenly
Sure.
once you have to play catch up, it's not easy. But if you
Mm.
if you if you don't do that self-reflection, then you will see them as a competitor and you want to compete head on. I
Mm.
think the best way is to self-reflect and look at what I'm good at. Now,
Mm.
I still dominate. Like if you take, let's say, the automotive industry in Germany, I know they are greatly impacted, but the brand itself in Germany, for example, yeah, take example, they're still very solid. Like even Switzerland has got a lot of very solid brands, and the brand heritage and so forth, and the trust of the brand. These are stuff that is still very sound and very solid in that market. Now,
Mm.
now, so what they are weak of? They are weak in terms of innovation. They're weak of in terms of scaling. They're weak on, let's say, if they're weak at certain thing and China is good at certain thing, can we tap on them? Can
Mm.
we now? If China has got a good process in scaling at a very minimum cost versus us, can we now look at China and say, now this part of the business, right? We'll want to
Mhm.
work with you and collaborate because you can do a lot better and more cost effective. And then and then you continue to dominate in your own market. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying to get your cars, right, your
Mm.
cars created, and also being manufactured in China and then shipped back. Maybe it could be a co-branded vehicle, it could be a co-branded, let's say, co-branding with BYD, Cherry, or whatever, and BMW brand, let's say, brand in in Europe, and you can still tap on it because BMW and Mercedes still have to got as a great brand heritage. I think these are
Mhm.
stuff that CEO of companies and the leadership team, right,
Yeah,
must
yeah.
self-reflect. And once you get to a point where you can accept that, well, I think we
Right,
can
right.
we can be good partner, right?
Yeah. So, in my list of questions here, I was wanted to ask what are the three biggest mistakes European companies make when approaching Chinese tech companies? You just mentioned the mindset, which is seems to be difficult to switch and see the real situation, right? Admit things first. Otherwise, before you don't do this, you cannot address it. What are two other things where you see potential issues
I
when
think
European companies approach Chinese tech firms?
I think I think having said, having talked about innovation and all that, I think a lot of Europeans still look at Chinese companies, right, being because I post a lot on social media, and when I
Mm.
look at some of the comments, many comments are still, while some recognize innovation, many still think that a lot of things that are being manufactured in China is still at the low end. Many still
Mm.
think so. So China is still the low end manufacturer. I think this mindset, this completely needs to change. If you still treat them as low end, oh yeah, so they build a car, but will a car work? Will a car catch fire? I've seen several of these comments coming from European, who talk still lowly about Chinese made product, right?
I see. Mm.
Now, so that's one of the things. Now, beside the uh, looking at China, as the mindset needs to change in terms of treating China as a partner, and also that's one way to build trust as well. Because I think there's a lot of distrust, right? There's a lot of distrust between thinking that if I work with China, if I pass on some of my IPs and so that will they copy? A lot of people still think that there's the mistake is that thinking that China always want to copy. Now, for the last 10 years that I've been working in China, the it used to be there was a time where there's a lot of copying going on because China has nothing. Now, if you look at many economy that's growing, right? In emerging economy, they copy too. Taiwan, Hong Kong, even Malaysia, Singapore. At one point, they were all copying
Oh,
because they had
Japan for sure as well at the beginning, right?
Japan. I mean, you look at Japan, the entire auto industry was copying the US, right? So copying is, I don't think there's any problem with copying, right? Uh, it's just that in China it's so rampant at one point, right? But because China had nothing, so they have to copy and they have to perfect it. So now they have reached a point where if you look at the auto industry, I don't think there's anything for them to copy outside China. They
Yeah,
got to
yeah, that's yeah, I guess so. You're right.
so
Yes,
so
totally.
so there's nothing to copy. So when there's nothing to copy, they have to start to think, right, how to innovate beyond now. Because if you look at the EV now, everything is innovation now. Yeah, initially they may have taken that step, the first step from Tesla. But if you look at a lot of Chinese cars now, they are even much better than Tesla,
Mm.
right? The software may still be a bit behind in terms of the autonomous driving, right? But if you look at the entire car, the makeup of the car, the quality of the car, the feature and all that, I think they're already ahead, much ahead, right?
Yeah.
So the concept of copying, I don't think exists already, and then I'm sure it applies to many things besides the auto industry. Now, Chinese always learn, and then once they iterate, right, they want to be better. I think that's how I would look at it, and this is how they are no longer they have been trying to get out of the low end manufacturing for years already. Now,
Mm.
a lot of those low end manufacturing has already moved down south. South mean not South China, as in down south to Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia. They've moved all that down there because they want to step up and become focusing into more advanced manufacturing, and that's where China want to be smart
Mm.
manufacturing, Industry 4.0, and all that stuff, and robotic and so forth. So I think you got to look at your partner as a very credible. You have to pick up that mindset that China can become a very credible partner. Look at
Yeah.
Huawei being one example. Very credible. A lot of companies are working with Huawei because Huawei is credible and a company with integrity, right? And if you look at all the segment of business that Huawei uh, has been working on, they are either number one or number two in the industry in the world. Very credible. And I think there's several Chinese companies who are like that. But in order for you to work with them, you got to start trusting them. Now, and also one more thing that I always find that working, this has always been not so easy working with European companies because they're very slow.
Mm.
Now, and that becomes they need to really step up, right? Because Chinese people, they don't work that slow. They want to like get on with the work as they and learn along the way. Now, I think that part of the business, I think European companies, they have to start getting used to it. They start to get used to it, right? And step up in terms of their working process and so forth. This is
Mm.
something that I think has been quite a pain even for me when we were working with some European companies back when I was still running companies, and that has always been problematic. And
Mhm.
one more point, that's the last one. I think now European companies likes to focus on contract, right? Right.
Yeah.
Chinese companies like to focus on relationship. They always believe that in order to work for the long term, right, is to focus on building that relationship, right? Because contract don't matter. I can sign anything I want, right? But if there's no relationship, ultimately the contract is not going to work. So I think
Mm.
there's a gap. There's a gap between the working. So I think I'm not saying that there's no contract. The contract still need to be in place, but build relationship. So if you work with Chinese company, right, you if you are a CEO of companies in Europe, you got to spend time
Mm.
working with the leadership team in China. You got to go visit China. So if you take example, some of the big American companies, right? Now count the number of times like Tim Cooks has been in China many times, right? If you are really serious of the business, the leadership team, the CEO should be visiting China regularly and talking to, because this is relationship building, and relationship building don't happen in like a couple of months. It takes time.
Mm.
And when they see the seriousness, I think that's where you build trust,
Mm,
right? And it's a relationship that will bond things, right, for a long, long term,
mm.
right? It is only when there's a lacking of relationship and trust, right, that things don't work out,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So you mentioned now Apple that seems to work well. You mentioned some of the German or European car manufacturers that are working in China with with technology partners. Are there other examples of good working relationships that you can show as yeah as proof that it's manageable and doable, right? So yeah.
I think one example that I think you can look at ABB, right?
Mhm.
ABB, a very big conglomerate. They are very integrated in China, right?
Okay.
They work with
More than
local
Siemens or
supplier.
so, or what, or also?
I haven't worked with Siemens, so I can't
Mm,
comment on it. But
okay.
ABB, on the other hand, right, you could really see that they are so integrated. They
Mhm.
work with local supplier. They integrate themselves into the entire ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
And what you need to become is that you need to demonstrate that you're not there to treat that as a market, as an export market, right? I just want to sell, right?
Mhm.
You want to be able to bring your product, bring your technology, bring your processes, and be integrated into the Chinese market, right? Uh, Integrating yourself with the supplier market, integrated with the distributor, and people running the show, very local and domestic. So there's a transfer of knowledge. There's a transfer of process, and that becomes partnership instead of just I'm selling something to you, right?
Mhm.
And companies that does that very well. Now, if you look at some of these very successful companies in China who have done well, right? Apple is one example, right? Tesla, a super good example where companies that are very integrated, even at the government level, right? And then who has a very strong and solid local team, right? They will do well because
Mhm.
the Chinese consumer will look at them and say that this is a very it's an international company but very 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 domestic, very very local, right? And they like them because they see them as a partnership, as a collaboration, instead of I'm just trying to dump my products in China, right?
Mhm.
And
Right. So looking forward, where do you see the some big opportunities in new technology areas where there's collaboration possible and where China is going to lead? I mean, it looks like in AI they have been just catching up with America. Europe is not there, even if some folks still think so. But I don't see it this way. But so they're catching up with them, and I expect them next 2 3 years they overtake robotics. There seem to be clearly there, industrial AI clearly there, right? Semiconductors are catching up, so which areas do you see as greatest potential for collaboration in, let's say, the next 5 years or so for Swiss and German companies?
I think technologically speaking, I think they are now. If you look at China 5-year plan, now the best way to look at where are all these heading, just look at the China 5-year plan. That will give you a sense of direction, what the priority of the government. And
Mhm.
AI and EV are definitely one of them, so energy and so forth. So when you look at areas of partnership, if you follow the 5-year plan, you can find a lot of opportunity for collaboration.
So
You
it's
just
actually
mentioned a
straightforward.
few.
It's just written there and then they do it, or it's also if
Yeah,
you like. So
because
yeah.
yeah, I mean, the 5-year plan is basically what the central government aspire in the next 5 years. And you just mentioned some of them already, right?
Mm.
Robotic. I mean, I think in terms of robotic, right, they're number one already. Far
Yeah.
number one in terms of volume and volume, right? A volume of robots manufactured, number one already. EV, I think they are way ahead already. And then you got AI. I think I think AI is an area of collaboration because now, if you look at the world right now, it's really down to two countries, right?
Mm.
But when I say down to two countries, again, it's not US versus China. It's really US and China. It's really close ecosystem versus open source. I see a world where it's going to be very hybrid. I see a world where companies are going to be leveraging open source where needed and closed source when needed. I don't see a world where it's either closed source or open source because
Mm,
I don't think that will work that way. And if you look at even if I take one example right now, if you look at iOS versus Android, one right, you don't see a world entirely iOS. You see a world maybe 20% iOS, 80% Android. Correct. Android, it's like the open source right network. Now, I see similarity. When I say open source, it doesn't mean just China because they are also open source in the US. Like companies like Nvidia has got Nemotron, and you've got Facebook that does Llama. So they are open source in the US. But what's happening in China because the entire model, most of the entire model are actually on open source. Therefore, you see a lot of activity and a lot of development in that space. And if you look at the frontier versus them in terms of performance, the open source are getting very good, right? And I'm not surprised that some of these open source will at some point, right, at least if not match the closed source or even better. And that's where I see an opportunity for enterprises, not just in Europe but globally, to be able to access open source and closed source at the same time.
mm,
Again, depending on the requirement, because open source promotes innovation, right? That's why it's open source. You can do a lot of development on it and you can train the model and so forth. Now, of course, there's this closed source. I mean, which Claude, Anthropic, and also OpenAI doing a great job, and also Gemini doing a great job in actually building a very good product, right? So I do see a world where things will be very, very hybrid. And
mm,
there's an opportunity for European companies to work with some of these open source companies in China. Robotic, smart manufacturing, and I still think that there's a lot of opportunity even within the auto industry, aviation, right? So again, I think it has to go back to the point that I said earlier. CEOs in Europe, they probably have to self-reflect because they themselves know themselves well. They know their market very well. They know what they're good at in their home turf in Europe. Now, when you want to negotiate with China, I think you got to recognize what you're good at, really good at, right, in Europe.
mm,
And that's where you want to take the position of strength to negotiate with China,
mm,
right? And that's how I think European companies should be taking that and negotiating. At least, both companies, right, are going to be able to negotiate, right, fairly because you've got something good that I want, and vice versa, right?
mm,
Not like I'm coming to China. I basically just want to tap you as an export market, or China goes to Europe. I want to tap you as an export. Now, I think the question that a lot of Chinese CEO always ask that, can I work with you so that I can become a more global company, right? Because
mm,
Europe has its own advantage, right? And some of these companies in China always look at abroad and say, if I can work with you and become a truly global company, right? I think this would be the best collaboration.
mm.
But
Wow.
again, you have to go back to the basic after self-reflection. It's the fact that you got to know what you're good at. Now,
Mm.
really recognize that being good at your unique selling proposition,
Yeah, yeah.
and then to negotiate with China in the position of strength.
Yeah. Of course, the Chinese are so strong in negotiation, the Europeans have no chance, right? So they need to hire someone like you who understands if they want to be on
I,
the
I
same
think
footing, right? So
I
that's
think when
big.
you negotiate with China, when you also need to understand what are they looking for. I mean,
Right.
every companies will be looking at different things, and you got to understand what are they looking for, and
Mm,
and if you know what they are looking for, and that's your strength, right? Take for example now, if I can access the market in Europe, working in collaboration with, let's say if I'm in automotive, being able to work with, let's say, Mercedes Benz or BMW to tap the market, joint effort tap the market. Why not? Right? Because that brand has got so much heritage, right? So many loyal, customers. That's one example. I'm just saying, right? Could that not be a collaboration where it's going to be a co-branded EV, for example, right?
mm,
Of course, there are many. No, but only the CEO themselves, the leadership knows what they're good at. and really know that this is something that I am good at, that I can negotiate right on the level playing field.
Right, right. Okay, cool. Let's do a final things, just very short answers to questions. Let's assume you were advising a Swiss CEO, and what are then the three most important things you would recommend before approaching a Chinese technology company? Let's put yourself in the in those in this scenario. So one thing Swiss companies should always do. What's the thing you recommend in this scenario?
Now, now, the very basic is that if you want to work with Chinese companies or work, go visit China, spend some time there,
Right, right.
right? Because if you don't spend enough time, or at least have someone who is advising you spend enough time, right?
Mm,
You're not ready to build a partnership,
mm,
right? So go to China, take a look at what they do, understand China.
mm.
If you don't understand yourself, at least you have a team that understands China.
Yeah,
So that it's not going to be like, oh, it's China Shop 2.0,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Right. And then and when you pick the right partner, spend time building that relationship. Spend time.
Right.
Like if it's between companies to company, at least the CEO, right, really demonstrate this commitment. At least the leadership team visiting their setup, and building that relationship with the Chinese counterpart,
Yeah. All
right?
right.
Because really relationship is key, very key in China, very key.
Yeah. So next question would be one thing they should never do. So what would that be?
Don't look at China being look at Chinese counterpart as equal. Make them feel equal. Very important, because I think the feeling that I always get in my years in China, even though I'm not a Chinese national, but because I worked there for so long, every time when I talk to a European company, they always make me feel that I'm lower.
Okay. All right.
I
Not
always feel
okay,
that.
but okay.
But sometimes without you realizing, right? If you give them that attitude, very likely that you're not going to be able to have a very good discussion, or the collaboration will never work.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
be equal, at least equal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. Okay. Third question. Um, one Chinese technology company everyone should know. Maybe you
Huawei,
have a surprise. That's not a
Huawei,
surprise. Everyone knows Huawei. They're also
Huawei.
big. They're big in
Yeah.
Switzerland as well, right? So,
The other company that I think people should also try and learn is a company called Tencent,
Tencent. Yeah. Okay.
right?
Right.
Tencent is reputable to be the largest company by market cap on the
Mm.
Chinese market. Largest company.
But
They
what can
own.
Swiss and European companies learn from Tencent? Maybe briefly, at least, give an insight. What's
I mean, uh, it's a
and
tech company.
collaborate. With, yeah.
Now, WeChat owns a lot of assets.
Mm.
One of the assets that we all use, most Chinese people use, is called WeChat,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, yeah, no.
right? So if you are partnering, building up partnership or whatever that you do in China, except especially in the consumer market, you obviously have to tap onto WeChat. You always have to tap onto working with Tencent, and they are very extensive in it. Now, the one single company that invested in a lot of startup and a lot of companies is Tencent.
Okay. In AI,
So
of
in
course, in particular, right? So
everything,
everything.
they are now any startup that eventually became very big companies, all of them had investment from Tencent maybe
Mm.
20 years ago, right?
Oh,
I give you example like JD.com,
right.
Meituan, many, several. So it's a company that you can learn so much about him. Like I said, Huawei probably is no surprise,
Mm.
but Tencent is a very to me, as far as to me is concerned, right? I worked with Tencent for several years, a very fascinating company, a very impressive company, and and they are literally in many things as well. But a lot of people don't see them that way. They probably heard of WeChat, but they don't know what Tencent is doing. So
Yeah, yeah.
Tencent has lots of businesses.
Okay. Thanks for mentioning them because they're also at the event. And very last question, same setting still. One technology trend from China that will surprise still Europe. If there's anything that can be still surprised, but maybe there's something that you think that will be a big
I will
surprise.
use a I will use a term physical AI. Now,
Yeah, well, that's known. Yeah. Okay. Mm.
so physical AI, now, so when I say physical AI, anything on the hardware side, on the hardware side, right, that can be AI enabled will
Mhm.
be AI enabled. Whether
Yeah.
there's a phone, whether there's a fridge, whether there's a EV, whether there's a robot, right? Anything that can be AI enabled on the physical side will be
Mhm.
AI enabled. I think this is, if people gets it right, then there's so much opportunity within that space to collaborate and partner with China
I see.
because
Okay.
they're going to lead this space. China is going to lead physical AI. I guarantee you that. Anything
Mm.
that goes into AI enablement,
Yeah.
China is going to game change that and lead that market by a
Yeah.
huge scale.
I
Right.
see. Okay, thanks so much for your time, and looking forward to asking you more questions at the event as well. And yeah, so uh, great insights and keep cold in your air conditioning environment. So, Kuala
You
Lumpur.
too, you too,
Yeah,
you too,
thanks.
Ralph.
All right, take
Yeah.
care. Cheers, Alvin. Bye bye.
Cheers. Take it. Bye bye.
Bye.